All right, boys and girls, we are back with a conversation with Michael Malice, author of The New Right. Michael, thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with me today.
My pleasure.
So I wanted to talk about a couple of recent developments that I think are worthy of your attention. First off, what was your first reaction when you heard that Susan Rice would be leading domestic policy for the Biden administration?
I'm not surprised, but I had been fearing the worst. My biggest concern with a Biden administration was the wars. And if Biden had been sincere, as many people have been sincere about regretting going into Iraq and the Iraq War vote, we've all made mistakes in our lives. This is a mistake that costs hundreds of thousands of people dying unnecessarily, perhaps. You would think, okay, I got this one really wrong. I'm going to take the steps in place to make sure that an error of this magnitude does not happen again. Ayn Rand and Atlas Shrugged had a line about errors of this magnitude are never made innocently. And you see how his staffing choices would absolutely push him in that same direction again. The neocons, the hawks, who I think are politics at its absolute worst, where they regard war as an issue in the same way that you and I might discuss like marginal tax cuts. I feel like there's a huge disconnect when they're talking about these things. Like you're talking about like bombing people's countrysides and raining terror on them and expect them to be like, well, those are the good guys, so what are you going to do? And it's really, we're always taught in school how war should be a last resort, which I think most people agree with. But it seems like with this administration, it's going to be a first priority. So I'm already, I think many other people online are trying to get their ducks in a row to nip this in the bud.
The interesting choices here that have been made seem to be more about personal loyalty to Biden than they are about any kind of coherent policy agenda. Just in terms of the selections, for example, you have a disappointment for the neocons when it came to the selection of General Lloyd Austin over Michelle Flournoy, who had been rumored to be the down the line, no question, the SecDef pick for Biden. At the same time, you have a selection for HHS in Javier Becerra, who is perhaps the most radical person, especially on the abortion issue, that we've ever seen put forward for HHS. That's something that I think really kind of sends the message. Biden may not be as much close to the kind of neocon agenda as we might have thought, but he's also someone who is clearly not going to shy away from engaging on these culture wars. There's this kind of ridiculous report in Bloomberg from yesterday about Biden having in mind someone to work for the White House that would be designed to and focused on outreach to conservatives. That doesn't really make a lot of sense if you're picking somebody who literally was, helping throw David Daleiden or trying to throw David Daleiden in jail over his reporting about Planned Parenthood.
Oh, I disagree. I think it makes a lot of sense because I think they're doing good cop, bad cop.
Yeah.
Because I think you saw, for example, the several cathedral operatives. You had Alyssa Milano saying, okay, I've been calling you guys Nazis for 4 years. Now let's olive branch. Let's unify unity together. Let's heal the nation. That's their little expression they're using. Then you have the guy from CNN who's always on Don Lemon's show. I'm blanking on his name. He was saying the Republican Party has to be razed to the ground, and none of these people can ever be allowed to power because they're a radical anti-democratic party. So it's good cop, bad cop strategy. And I think the approach was what their version of compromise is. We're not going to have retribution to you guys for all the Trump stuff you did. We're going to go back to 2016. We're all going to pretend like none of this ever happened, like if someone had like an affair, right? And they're like, okay, we're going to move on, sweep it under the rug. And I think what they don't realize is for the Trump supporters, a huge percentage of them, it was never about Trump.
Yeah.
It was always about what there's a lot of MAGA people it was about Trump, but a lot of people it's about what Trump represented. And I am very gladdened to see how this outreach seems to be having no positive consequences.
So one of the things that I'm interested in moving forward is how the different aspects of the New Right react to this new administration. One that I think, an issue that I think you have been paying a lot of attention to. What's your general view this early on about how they've been reacting in this moment and what they anticipate about the coming months and years?
I'm shocked how on the ball they have been, because historically this has been let me break this down a little bit of some time. This has been the approach, which is Nancy Pelosi and people like Nancy Pelosi go to San Francisco. They say Mitch McConnell's fighting against our values. Send me money. I'm going to get reelected. And they do that. And Mitch McConnell says, truthfully, Nancy Pelosi doesn't represent us. Give me money. I'm going to get reelected. They both do that. The whole time, the New York Times, Harvard are lobbing bombs from behind enemy territory. They're unscathed, right? Yeah. And that's kind of this kabuki theater that they've all been engaged in. And now, for the first time, with Biden being elected, I don't think anyone in this whole new right landscape cares about Biden. Their guns were immediately targeted at agencies like Washington Post, CNN, these governors. And I think that's a very, very healthy phenomenon, because if push comes to shove, Nancy Pelosi doesn't hate many of these people the same way that the New York Times does. The same way the New York Times editorial board is far more radical than almost all of the most radical Democrats.
And what you're kind of acknowledging coming out of this election too is that those people are just less important in the big scheme of things. It's less important who Nancy Pelosi is when she has a 4-seat majority or what have you,
right,
than it is if you have the type of megaphone to be able to convince, just for the sake of hypothetical argument, that a story about Hunter Biden and potentially having tax evasion problems and being corrupted by China is just a complete fiction and Russian disinformation in the lead up to a presidential campaign, than if you're Nancy Pelosi and you have a majority that frankly now depends on a squad of social justice Democrats that has actually increased to the point where they can deny her a majority on things.
Let's look at it another way. Let's suppose I'm a Democratic governor who feels the pain of these small businesses, who realizes, okay, this COVID's a big problem and we had to lock down, but at the same time, my constituents are hurting. I'm not in a position as a Democratic governor or Republican governor, really, although Republicans are better positioned because they have more of an adversarial relationship with the press, to loosen up. Because as soon as I do, there's going to be articles from Politico, The Hill, New York Times. Look at this governor. Look what they're doing. They're making you unsafe. They're destroying your whole state. They're killing grandma. They're not in a position to do, even if they had wanted to. So that just shows you who is wagging the dog in the situation.
Michael Malice is the author of The New Right. You should follow him on Twitter, and you can check him out at Locals. Is that malice.locals.com?
That's correct.
For more from him, I'm Ben Domenech. We'll be back with more of The Federalist.